Doom posting. It's been going on for quite a while now, since the beginning of 2024. It's funny to the people watching the spectacle, but disastrous to the agencies and VTubers it involves. And somehow, if you're both, you might not know how to feel. 2024 was not a year of the corpos, and we are still feeling its effects early onto 2025. People have awoken to the absolute state of agency culture in the last year, but in this year, they're only realizing that, you know what, maybe their culture, their dreams, and the lofty ambitions a lot of agencies seek to provide are lacking. Grounded have become them VTubers, tempered are their fanbase expectations. Because as a lot of VTuber agencies crash and burn, many who thought the future of the industry are those that are resilient small corpos have their faith in that belief shaken. Perhaps we were all wrong, because this dumpster fire is the absolute state of corpos. Back in the early days of VTubing, agencies like Hololive, with the absolute success of their talents, give off the promise of glory, of realizing your content creator dreams with the community around you. The success of Hololive was what a lot of aspiring VTubers wanted to achieve, and to a lot of them, the success of Hololive was what they half expected when they joined an agency. People that joined even Hololive probably didn't expect how messy things are in this industry. The chaos of management, the lack of direction. Heck, setting up debuts were also hectic for big VTuber agencies back then. Because when you're a pioneer of a new industry, you often experience problems that fans and onlookers think are obvious to fix in hindsight. Nijisanji and Hololive, being the two biggest titans, experienced the most of these problems. And even if they can't avoid making a big-ass problem, how much more so for small corpos? As in all industries, the first people of VTubing, regardless of its origin and size, is eventually going to become, in some way, shape, or form, influential, provided of course that they stick around long enough. Because it's these VTubers that are talented and work really hard that eventually come to apply for big agencies and become well known, that or they hit it off at becoming indies. That or they experience the fate suffered by most aspiring content creators, irrelevancy, and never making it despite how hard they try or how talented they are. The first notable small agencies that formed during the start of the boom were agencies such as Tsunderia, MyHoloTV, CyberLive, FaceConnect, Production Kawaii, Lucid, V-Reverie. Of course, there are more people like Tomopos, Project Kawaii, different from Production Kawaii. But the 8 I just mentioned are more relevant and key ones, at least from the outside looking in. You might realize that literally all these agencies are fucking dead, save for FaceConnect and Lucid. And the stories of these agencies have a key similarity in that a lot of them seem to not really know what they were doing when they started. The first among them was Tsunderia, who just shut down some time ago. Now, Tsunderia failed because they ran out of resources, but their talents lived on, at least some of them. But we aren't here to talk about the legacy of the company and the talents, we are here to discuss and study agencies' collapse. I don't intend to kick these agencies while they're already dead, but to study the circumstances of their failure. But while this many VTuber agencies started during the early days of VTubing, there are way more that came 2021 to 2024, and they still had the same problems and faced the same issues that their predecessors did. And in here, we'll explore some of the more common factors and give off some examples. Resources, I think, is one of the most common reasons to die. I don't think people realize that it's not that expensive to start an agency, but it's super expensive to keep it afloat. Oftentimes, agencies have to rely on flexibility or certain workarounds to ensure that their money is being used most efficiently. These can often manifest in ways like hiring managers and staff members from third world countries because they're cheaper, refusal to pay or delays in payment on artists and asset creators, or sometimes not paying their fucking talents at all because the CEO wanted to recoup the money that they lost probably. And while being flexible in certain ways isn't necessarily bad, agencies have to be pretty smart about delegating resources. If an agency is not able to pay staff members for the amount of work that they're doing, that's gonna lead to a bunch of problems. Hell, I've heard too many stories where it's normally just 1 or 2 staff members that knew what they were doing in an agency and held it together. If payments for artists and the quality of work aren't decent enough, that is going to lead to a lot of problems. The lack of resources branches out into smaller problems that eventually become bigger, and the issue is that the concept of a VTuber agency is survival of the fittest. Audiences and viewers are limited. Small corpos fight for a crumb of clout and actually compete with indies as well, not just other corpos. It's part of the reason why backstabbing and a strong sense of hostility is so common in indie groups. And even if you manage to actually get a decent following, maintaining that following, and thus your income, is the biggest hurdle. For a while now, this was why Tsundere and Production Kawaii was still surviving the first Corpo purge of 2022, especially since certain talents from that agency did get massive breaks into popularity, like Production Kawaii's 3rd gen, Nene Amano and Miori Solesta, but after a while they shut down because it was difficult to sustain. This is the inevitable fate of all agencies who seem to have some success initially but fail to truly maintain it or diversify their streaming revenues. Amberglow, Heavenrand, Prism Project after being bought by Sony. So the one thing that CEO wannabes need to understand before starting a corpo, if they're actually serious, is that they gotta be able to fork out a lot of money, especially if they want to have a chance, especially for getting half-decent models and assets, and they have to not expect to earn any income, at least for the next few years. It's like esports in a way, where a lot of investors and businesses came in after seeing all the money the industry makes, then ultimately realizes that it's not profitable unless you know what you were doing. As any business, VTuber agencies for the most part don't make money initially, even when certain members become popular. So the CEO or whoever is funding the agency gotta expect to lose a lot of money while they are running it. Sometimes though, an agency can have an initially massive pool of resources but use it in seemingly irresponsible ways. This action attracts a lot of talent and potential, especially if you're paying for quality assets, but it's going to shorten an agency's lifespan. A key example, I think, is Idol Corp, who came into the industry flexing their budget by sponsoring a shit ton of creators to watch and promote their VTubers and was practically everywhere in the space. They had very grand debuts, prismatic tier assets, amazing promo. For a time, I genuinely believed Idol Corp had the potential to be part of the big corpo sphere. 2 years later, however, they got brought out by Brave Group because they couldn't continue their operations anymore, and I think spending was a key reason. So while I think having a shit ton of money per talent is super good for a talent, no amount of money can make up for the fact that a talent won't get favored by the algorithm for whatever reason. Perhaps a better iteration of this factor is not necessarily the amount of resources, but the use of it. One piece of advice for VTuber models that are decent: find a Japanese or Chinese artist. In my experience, they're cheaper, work faster, and a lot of times have better quality. The downside is that they're a lot more difficult to approach and converse with, but I think it's worth 90% of the time. The quality of the talent is also a big factor. The unfortunate truth that many aspiring VTubers have to know is that a lot of you suck. You're not as entertaining or funny or as talented as you might think you are. Yes, I could phrase that a little better, but I think saying it like that will ground you to reality better than if I cushion the blow. The people that interview or invite these talents in the agency can sometimes have a bad eye for talent and take anyone that is willing and eager to join or has a large following. And when these talents debut, they are not able to have the success that they may be hoping for. The skill of choosing a good talent that fits the character and culture is rare. A talent that is creatively skilled and is actually respectful and professional is even rarer. Though sometimes it's not actually the talents themselves, but the tropes they embody. Certain personalities and character archetypes just aren't meant for virality, but are more niche. More say-so ASMR VTubers, for example, aren't going to find the same success as ASMR tubers who give their audiences blowjob streams for better or worse, unless they were in Hololive. More passive, shy, and cutesy talents aren't going to find the same success as a chaotic lolly. That's just how it is a lot of the time. The whims and demands of the audience shift as the tides, and it is beyond anyone's power as a creator to control. Sometimes, maybe you aren't meant to be in an agency or even a VTuber. Perhaps you'll fare better as a YouTuber than a streamer. Your skills may be better for other aspects of content creating. But the other side of this problem is that sometimes talents can be bitches. Look, we give a lot of shit to a lot of agencies and a lot of them deserve it. But sometimes the talents can be in the wrong and we never know it. Because VTuber fans have a tendency to worship their Oshis more piously than a Brazilian football fan. I make memes in this channel about how VTubers are 30-year-olds who pretend to be high schoolers, or people that just got out of high school, that a lot of the culture here resemble the pettiness of high school basically. Lots of unprofessionalism, lots of infighting, lots of backstabbing. The human condition makes it so that people can get jealous of each other's success. Maybe a manager or a genmate made a mistake or said the wrong thing at the wrong time and they hold on to that forever. Maybe they will envy the attention and the money that their more successful genmates have and subconsciously try to sabotage it. Heck, maybe the talents are skilled but are just brats that refuse to do anything or cooperate with management because they're a little too stubborn. As an agency, you can't control these things. Even as an agency tries their best to make their talents understand or to stop doing X, Y, and Z, most of the time, people of this sort won't. When dealing with humans, you get human problems, which is why AI is getting popular probably. But while talents are a big factor for an agency's success and failure, leadership, as any other industry, is probably bigger. I'm not talking about managers themselves, although they do apply when relevant, but mostly the higher-ups, the executives, the shot callers, and leaders. I'm gonna be honest, a lot of the time I don't really fault the individual managers and staff of VTuber agencies unless they're independently being an ass, because I think upper management is mostly responsible for a lot of the cases that we've seen. Like for example, I don't blame the individual managers of Nijisanji for the shit that's going on in that company, it's mostly just a direction issue. The reason that any CEOs of a small corpo can mess up their company can range from pretty innocent to pretty bad. And a lot of these reasons boil down to these 5 leadership issues that leadership positions have. The lack of experience is probably the most common but often the saddest. I've seen a lot of CEOs who mean well, who genuinely want to take care of their talents and foster a community, whether they have the resources or not, but perhaps this is one of the first companies that they started, or perhaps they cannot capitalize on a windfall. Maybe they got unlucky. Sometimes, they may not understand company flows or not know how to network with other companies in order to get partnerships going on, and as a result, they fail. Phase Connect is perhaps a good example of a situation where an inexperienced leader got his ass beaten by his own company and was basically forced to straighten up. These are parts of the growing pains that a lot of agency leaders experience, and it's no shame to have them, provided that they actually learn along the way, and they get the same kind of hate that any agency that fails gets. The lack of understanding of VTubing is the middle of the pack. It seems like a lot of VTuber CEOs have this to a certain extent, where they just don't get the culture of VTubing, the unspoken rules, the traditions, how to treat other VTubers, and how to not piss people off. And this problem is similar to the lack of resources issue, where it's basically the root of many downfalls and PR disasters. Recently, there was a VTuber agency named Vols who had a talent named Adora Fortune, who made this joke about finding fertility drugs in somebody's closet, a joke that references the industry's affection towards old women pretending to be cute anime girls. Her agency straight up forced her to apologize and delete this post, believing it to be offensive and insensitive. And the fact that upper management saw this, thought it was offensive, and forced the talent to take it down, whispers out of touch with the culture of the industry. Granted, the agency did make a statement, even saying that Adora herself wanted to remove the statement, not the agency. Which... But hey, rat posting aside, good on them. Situations like this are common, and it shows in subtle ways, such as CEOs not understanding that debuting multiple waves and multiple VTubers in a short span of time is a bad idea, and sometimes not so explicit, like not realizing why hiring a minor, even if it's okay with certain places, is not okay. Or even not realizing why making a very detailed announcement on why a talent is terminated is bad PR. This even extends to businessmen who think a dedicated streaming platform that directly competes with YouTube or Twitch is a good idea, like AniLive. Not necessarily calling them out of touch, but come on man, it's a bad idea. The industry is too small for now, maybe get the big talents in and I'll start believing in the vision. Weird and creepy CEOs are where things are a little odd. I think it's very not good to be in a romantic or sexual relationship with your boss, but on the other, these VTubers are grown women, and there can be cases where a VTuber actively pursues these relationships in order to gain favor from upper management, and honestly, that's an entire segment of its own. But more relevantly, are CEOs that start VTuber agencies because they want to be surrounded by anime women who they can have some power over. And you can see how this can develop super bad, super fast. It's a bunch of lonely, wealthy kids who's barely felt the touch of a woman growing up and discovering this shit. Malicious CEOs are those that actively exploit their talents for their benefit, either for money, for ego, or a sense of control. It overlaps a little bit with the weird and creepy CEO, but this one is a little less specialized because it takes multiple forms. V-Reverie, Akio Air, Waktor, Kometa. These are just agencies that plain sucked. Regardless, talents that are involved in a company that went to shit can still experience significant mental damage, so the innocence or maliciousness of these circumstances I don't think matters in the grand scheme of things. Still, I think it's also important that incompetence and malice need to be differentiated, just to be a little bit more fair to the person that fucked up versus the person that actively wanted to fuck it up. A lot of agencies died this year. Ian, Production Kawaii, Akio Air, Amberglow, Yumi plus 7 Rand, and all these agencies that AJ Shell listed. Thank you, AJ. And often, even if an agency can do something good, the last key reason of a failure is just bad luck. A small corpo could do all the right things. They could have good talents, provide them with everything they need to an extent, supportive staff members, and a decent community, but still fail. Most of the time, the algorithm just won't favor you. This is the void factor when it comes to starting a corpo. Sometimes we just don't know what's going to succeed or happen. We can experiment and try out new things, but it might be that our good ideas won't work for the present, but will work in the future. There will be other agencies that will be hurt from this, that will learn from this, from the hardships and experiences around them. I expect there to be more corpos, perhaps some more competent than others, but regardless, maybe we need to stop expecting the best from any agency. VTubers need to temper the expectations and what they can get out of this, but at the same time, they need to realize that when you sign into an agency, know what you're signing into. That it's a job, that you will be relinquishing a few of your creative control. The agencies that come up may not be perfect, maybe only slightly better than those that came before. Perhaps they only meet the bare minimum for a half-competent CEO. They are not going to promise you prosperity, but a slim chance to have it. They will not promise you financial security, but perhaps they can promise you belonging, community, the ability to make content while being supportive. This is the absolute state of corpos in 2024, running into 2025. A state of chaos, flames, and hardship. But as they say, hardship breeds stronger men. So let us hope that this hardship will result into stronger talents and wiser agencies.